So, one of the things that's become really clear to me is how patterns in the macro and patterns in the micro are actually the same or similar patterns. So, for example, when you're in an abuse dynamic and it's hard to see what's happening, you want to believe the story that you have about you and this other person. Maybe that you are in love, or maybe that this is your parent who loves you, or maybe that this is a loyal, great friend. And so as things ramp up, as their entitlement behaviors get more extreme and they start to step into abusive behaviors and then abuse, it's hard for the victim to orient their thinking, to reorient to what's actually happening, because it's not what's happening is not the story that they've learned, is the story about where they are and what this relationship is. So we see the same thing on a national, international scale where people, leaders of nations or countries, are engaging in behaviors that do not match the worldview that we have. So as they engage in these behaviors, we're wanting to think they're aberrations. Oh, we just need to have another UN meeting. And so their entitlement gets more extreme, the behaviors get more extreme as they move into abusive behaviors, behaviors that override other countries' autonomy. So, like invading Ukraine, taking Crimea, years before that, and what the United States has been doing. Well, everybody wants normalcy. Everybody wants to believe the story that they have constructed around reality. And so the same thing that is happening in the abuse dynamic, it happens in geopolitics. Okay. So a lot of what I do in terms of analytics and theories and prediction often cross apply. To me, they're just operating in different scale. And so when I'm talking to victims of abuse about preparedness, World War III is coming, famine conditions, hyperinflation, blah, blah, blah. That is because the behaviors that people are engaging in right now look to me like the same kind of learned helplessness you see with victims of abuse in an abuse dynamic. They don't want to believe the trajectory. And even if they do, they don't believe that there's anything that they can do about it. And there's this inner, like, kind of giving up and resignedness. The abuse trains you to believe there's nothing that you can do, or that anything that you do is going to be wrong. So don't even bother. And so victims internalize that because they've been, brainwashed into it, gaslit into it, abused into it. And so they have this way of thinking that intrinsically disempowers them. And it's not from within themselves. It's been imposed. So, in the macroeconomic side of things, we have people that are just trying to live their lives. Things are getting sort of worse, and so they're concentrating on the small piece that they can concentrate on because it's so overwhelming what's happening in aggregate. And so when they're getting those spikes of information that indicate that there's a problem, we're getting that kind of like burying our head in the sand, or let's say, what is it, millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha. We're like the unserious generations. So it's like you get the dog like it's fine surrounded by fire memes. Because it does get to a point where it's overwhelming and it doesn't feel like that you can do anything. So for example, that last video that I was talking about worldwide political events, that's why I was like, no, we don't need to be overwhelmed. We can just take each little step, and each little step is empowering, right? It's changing our ways of thinking. And the same thing is true for the abuse dynamic. Maybe you can't do everything right now, but you can take a step. You can do a thing that empowers you. And the more of those steps that you take, the more you empower yourself, the more you get to a place where you can take steps and leave the abuser, if that is within the realm of possibility for you. that's again why I'm not a fan of like the guru model that you see often in victim and abuse communities. You'll see victims who want to share their story and then they want to become like a guru to other victims. Well, now I've been through it, I want to explain it to you. And so it ends up putting that person in a position over the other people. And that's very similar to the abuse dynamic. Even if it's intended for good, that is not necessarily empowering people. So when a victim thinks, "Oh, I'm going to have a program, or I'm going to do like a YouTube channel, or I'm going to do something that puts me in front of other victims of abuse," if they're doing it in a way that is not empowering victims of abuse or the audience, and you're charging for it, because more of what the abuse pattern was does not help victims of abuse. And the thing is, it can maybe feel like it's helping. You've joined the, I don't know, goddess circle, or you're doing the workshops or whatever it is, and you're following like this one person, and then thinking, well, this, elevating them like in your mind, and we don't want to be. We don't want to be doing that. That's the opposite of what victims of abuse need. So the ability to empower yourself, not just on the micro, but also on the macro. Now, one thing that is a rubric that I use that I think would be very helpful for victims of abuse, in terms of understanding what prediction means. So we have a model of the world. We have a model of other people. We have a model of the relationship. And the more accurate our model, the more accurately we're able to predict what this person or what the events are going to do. So that's one reason why the first sign, or one of the first signs that you're in an abuse dynamic, is confusion. And the reason why is because the model that you have and the reality not lining up. And they don't line up because the abuser misrepresented themselves to you. They're telling you a story that they want you to believe that does not actually happen to be driving their behaviors. So when you have that disconnect between, I want you to pledge allegiance to this idea of like maybe love or loyalty or friendship or family, right? And we have this story that we tell ourselves about it. We've romanticized it. But my actions are taking advantage of your investment, emotional investment in this story. So you're making decisions that you think are informed decisions that are not informed decisions. So your predictions about what this other person is going to do are not going to be accurate. And I think that's why victims of abuse, when they start consuming abuse literature and resources, and then they start getting the concepts and like ideas, and then you go, oh my gosh, like this is happening to me. You suddenly have a concept for it. You suddenly have words for it. You can suddenly articulate it. It has validity because other people are experiencing the same thing. When we don't have the language for it, we can't communicate about it. And I'm old enough to remember the before times, before we had terms like gaslighting, before we had terms like abuse, before we had terms like, emotional abuse, financial abuse, reproductive coercion. These concepts were not articulated. And so these things were happening to victims, and they were not able to explain why this person was harming them. They just knew they were harmed, and they couldn't get it to another person in a way that they could get support. They couldn't get those ideas across. So when we have the language, it helps articulate the model. And then the more accurate our model is, the more we understand what this other person is doing and why this relationship is happening the way that it is. Now, same thing on a macro scale. When you see people making predictions and about their models, the more accurate their model, the more accurate their predictions. One of the predictions that I made, and the reason for this video is because I'm looking at sort of the totality of the run up to World War III. And so certain things have to occur for that to occur. Since I know the destination and since I know what has to occur, I can make predictions about what will occur. And so one of the predictions that I made oh my gosh, months ago, years ago, was essentially that the Panama Canal was in trouble. I can't remember if I did it in a video or in an article, but I basically was like, the Panama Canal, there's going to be an issue there. If I were Panama, I would be concerned. And the reason why I said that was because Panama is a stress point in international shipping, just as the Strait of Hormuz is a stress point in international shipping. So we know what's happening with the Strait of Hormuz, but imagine my face this morning when I gotta figure out how to share a screen. But anyway, there's like the shipping guy. What's his name? Worldwide shipping. No, what's going on with shipping? The shipping guy is doing this video on the Panama Canal explosion. And I was like, oh, is it time? Oh my gosh. Okay, let's get ready. Because even if I don't know the future, you can know patterns. You can understand what has to occur for an outcome that I know is coming. And so the foreshock pattern that I mentioned in my World War III preparedness video, that is true for both geopolitical events and abuse dynamics. You get these forewarnings, these flashes of the future, these foreshock patterns that indicate to you that there's a stress point and that stress point is going to basically get bigger and more powerful. And it's going to end up being a point of destabilization. So in your abuse dynamic, the abuser flashes on something and you think, oh no, but like that's done now. We had a conversation and that's no longer an issue. Well, then maybe it comes up again in 4 months. And then after that, it comes up again in 2 months. And then after that, it comes up again in 1 month. So that forewarning pattern, that wave and receive pattern that I was describing in that video, that happens in abuse dynamics. As the abuser gets more comfortable to assert themselves over the victim, that entitlement, that intrinsic entitlement that they feel that's unreasonable, leads them to take bigger and larger actions more frequently. So you get this wave coming in and then receding. And so you think, oh, well, it's back to normal. But the waves get bigger and their intensity increases and their frequency increases. And the same pattern on the macro. So you get this like data point that lets you know there's a stress fracture there. There's a point of destabilization. And then you see maybe a wave come in, a Panama Canal explosion, right? That lets you know, oh, there's a stress fracture point here. As this gets worse, the consequences, the impacts get worse. Same thing for the abuse dynamic. So anyway, basically I'm sort of outlining kind of like how I mentally approach these topics, but also my reasoning behind why I am integrating everything the way that I'm integrating. Because it's essentially a way of approaching systems research and theory, although I'm not a systems scientist. So this is just all very amateur and entertainment for me. But the person that I like to quote is Sabine Hassenfelder. She talks about how the general behavior of systems near a critical point, they have deviations from average that get more extreme, and they show correlations between each other. And so essentially, this is the idea behind the micro, behind the abuse dynamics, and this is the idea behind the macro and behind geopolitical events and relationships. And the answer for us is the same. The answer is to work toward correcting our model of reality, understanding what is actually happening, because the better you understand what is real, the better your predictions, the more effective actions you can take, especially on your own behalf and on behalf of like people who love you and rely on you and care about you. So hopefully this makes sense. But we are wanting to orient to reality and we are wanting to empower ourselves. So for example, be very careful about what media you consume while in victim spaces. Be careful about following content creators or signing up for programs, spending money that you are putting the answers in someone else's hands. It's good to get that information. There are certainly people that we can watch and respect and say, oh, I like what this person is doing. But you never want to be in the emotional space of like, this person is rescuing me. Like, no, 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 no. This person should be empowering you because you are the person that needs the information in order to make actions and take steps. Anyone can tell you what to do, right? That's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. Most of the time, victims of abuse know exactly what to do. They just don't want to do it. And so you have to internally get to a place where you're wanting to take the action and you're motivated to act on your own behalf and the behalf of others who are depending on you. So getting to that point is this internal process. And it's driven by how we gestalt with information and people that we get from out in the world, but it's happening within yourself. You are the genesis of what moves you away from the abuser and away from the abusive relationship. The power has always been yours. The power is always within us. So anyway, I hope this makes sense, and I'll talk to you next time.